Historic day, to say the least. This day was a dream for many, but now the dream has come true. After more than 85 years, Friday prayers were performed here in Hagia Sophia. We have the latest numbers. Approximately 350,000 people attended today's historic Friday prayers. The Turkish president was present here along with many other senior members of the cabinet, and including ministers. So what is the significance of this day for the Turkish population and, of course, the Muslim world? Let's discuss this further. With us we have Professor Wahbi Baisan. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us today in this hot weather. Let me start by asking you, what are your thoughts? You have seen this historic day yourself. You were here since the morning. You saw the prayers. You saw how many people flocked to this place from different parts of Istanbul, I must say. In fact, some people were here from outside of Turkey. So what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, historic day, it symbolizes something in 1950s set as a targeting almost impossible, like a utopia. Hagia Sophia represented, in fact, the culture that very much promoted coexistence. Now, I think we should look into the history of it, which is like in 1453 when Mehmed II, who is known as the Conqueror, took Istanbul. Actually, he wanted to preserve these monumental buildings simply because he had seen them as part of world heritage, and he wanted his great-grandchildren of this city and other cities in this regard to see and appreciate the same architectural value. Therefore, they did not abandon the building. They did not demolish the building. In fact, what they did was, as they did in many monasteries as well from 8th, 9th, 10th centuries, they just put minarets around it and converted it into a mosque. But here what's important is, we should underline that the Mehmed II and the subsequent sultans did not lack the money. If they wanted, they could have built a bigger one, etc. Easily done it. I mean, there was no force to prevent them. So they didn't. They just wanted to keep these monumental buildings. Just look at it on the eastern side of the Hagia Sophia. We have this Aya Irini, a huge monastery,
Professor,
still preserved.
A rather silly question here. What is the exact pronunciation of Hagia Sophia?
Hagia Sophia, they call it. Yeah, Hagia Sophia, because Aya, as Aya Irini, Aya means the saint in Eastern Roman Empire, namely for the Orthodox Christians. So the preservation of this monumental building shows how much they were integrated in the world civilizations, and they've seen themselves as part of it, and so did the Ottoman subjects. That's how they saw. I mean, if you go to the Zeyrek Mosque, it's a mosque like a pure details of a monastery. If you go to Kalanderhane in Vezneciler, the same thing. Why did they do that? We should be grateful to them because, you know, once you take the city in a predominantly Muslim culture, these buildings will have no function. Nobody is going to go to church again because, you know, it's a Muslim culture now. But turning it into a mosque, showing that you have the power to build a really large mosque complexes.
But still you want to preserve.
Yes, look at the Blue Mosque just opposite, right? But the architecture in the Blue Mosque, what we call Sultan Ahmet Mosque, is not really disturbing or overshadowing what we have here in Hagia Sophia. It's like a jewel of Istanbul.
Correct.
You see? So we should see it that way. 100 years later, Sultan Süleyman built this huge mosque complex just probably 1 or 2 kilometers away from here. It's not overshadowing or disturbing the magnificence of this building. So, and also Sultan Mehmed II issued a decree. It's not a decree, rather a vakıf senedi, a foundation deed, in which he said precisely this building should be preserved, should be looked after as a prey for worship. And so did Muslims for hundreds, for centuries. And in 1934, of course, depending on the circumstances there, the government's view, etc., this has been converted into a museum. But
Correct.
originally, this was built in 537 AD as a place for worship.
Okay. Now, Professor, a key question here. I'm sure many are watching us right now from the western part of the world, our Christian friends and Jew friends. So they must be wondering, now that Hagia Sophia's status has been changed to a mosque, what happens to the mosaics, the murals inside, the Christian mosaics? Are they going to be preserved? Are they going to be looked after? Are Turkish authorities going to remove some of them or not? How is that going to work out?
Well, this is not even a question, because for centuries, these mosaics were preserved while this building was functioning as a mosque.
Okay.
Now there is no reason to remove them. Having said that, in Islam, in our places, in our mosques, Muslims don't prefer to see anything other than the, names and some calligraphy, etc. Therefore, they are going to put a curtain on it. Probably, I don't know how now. That's all. So they will cover it while they're praying, and thereafter, it's going to open again and will become a public space. Now, we should see these big monumental structures like Süleymaniye, like Fatih Mosque. They built them as a public space. People to come, even if they do not pray, they just simply wander around. This is your place, you see. Now look at Süleymaniye Mosque. You have the library, you have a small clinic, you have imaret, which is a free food distribution center, you have a hammam, public bath, you have shops underneath. So you don't come there exclusively for, if you pray, yeah, of course, you have the place, but this is a social areas, a public space.
And this is also
this
a place of worship. People from all walks of life are welcome. The status is a mosque, of course.
But
Muslims,
they will have access. Yes.
Absolutely.
Except probably because they want to keep the privacy and respect while they're praying, which is like, if you look at it, one is very early in the morning, so there will be no tourists coming.
Correct.
And then you have the noon prayer, let's say 1 a.m., 15, 20 minutes will be closed, maybe 4, 5 o'clock again, 15, 20. Why should that be a problem anyway? Because in order to enter, they were waiting in the long queues and they were paying fee.
You spoke about this when you came to our program, The Brief. And Professor, another positive thing here, people don't have to pay anymore. They can enter
absolutely. That's I don't understand. When the status changed, for the visitors, the only thing changed was entrance fee. But if they insist, I'm saying that we should put there a big barrel for the donations and let them pay as much as they want. No, nothing is going to change. I think the criticisms are quite unfounded and baseless. Why I say this is that I read articles coming up on the Western press, especially in the US, is saying that this is a major threat for the minorities
cultural
in Turkey,
cleansing.
Cultural cleansing and all that. But then when they say this, they do not explain any further. They leave it very obscure and they don't bother explaining because they cannot explain. And how is this going to affect other ones? Because we, in the last program, said that Bulgarian church, they spent millions of dollars and they restored it in its original beautiful status. In Edirne Kapı, another Orthodox church, and many synagogues and churches actually being restored. Let me tell you this, Jafar, in Istanbul, we do not have this many Christians to go and fill these places. But yet I support it as well because this is part of my cultural heritage. So I want them to be restored, even if nobody is going there anymore.
And unlike Greece, where Muslims are treated as second-class citizens, minorities are not treated in an equal fashion. Turkey treats all its minorities equally, and I believe there is one place of worship for every 462 non-Muslims here in Turkey. That is the highest in Europe.
Absolutely, but they go actually. They don't have this many praying people. So what they do is they make their small groups, and before the program I was telling you, they go visit each church every Sunday, a different one, because the others remain vacant. But this doesn't mean that ministries or the decision makers in Turkey just let them collapse and they don't want to see them there. They're well preserved, and even those need some restorations, all done from the state budget, not put on the shoulders of the minorities. So that's extremely important here.
Okay, now, Professor, very quickly, my last question to you. Again, some are calling this move illegal. Some say it was a church, which it was. That's a fact. It was a church, but before it was a mosque. It was a church, 1400 years ago. So please help us understand the legality of the court's decision, the legality of the fact that the court annulled the 1934 decree, the legality of the conquest of Istanbul, but very quickly, I know we are short on time.
Well, let me begin like this. In 1492, the Jews were expelled from Spain, and Turkish Sultan sent the big vessel and brought them here. They're still grateful. They still every year commemorate that, Jews. And then I have a decree, and today I mentioned this before, that one of these international auction houses auctioning a decree dated 1501, in which the king is saying in his imperial decree that within 3 days all Muslims should get out of here. And if they stay, they will taste the bitter pain of death, and their properties will be confiscated. Now, this is 1501. They didn't want to see any other faith around, and they demolished mosques, etc. But here we're talking about a sultan who told his subjects, guys, these are part of our heritage. We have to preserve it, protect it, and therefore I'm converting them into mosques. As I said again, they did not lack money, and they did not have like a force over them. Now,
so I understand it in a better way. It was not converted as a show of power, rather a show of function, so that it can serve the people, serve the population, serve the majority of the population.
Well, that's absolutely, if you want to show off power, you would take a hammer and demolish it. So that's how you show off. I know why I don't support it, but there are many other ways of demonstrating power, not to keep it up. But let's remember, during an uprising, what we call Nicaea uprising, they burnt it down. Christians themselves here in Istanbul. And then when the first wave of crusaders arrived in Istanbul, they looted it. So we're not, I mean, it's not to blame anybody, but these things happened. Whereas Muslims for centuries protected it, so they should be grateful for that. Now, when you take a city, when you take, like in Spain, you know, this is your sovereignty, this is your dominance. You do whatever you do, we like it or we don't like it, right? But Muslims, sultans, choose to preserve it. But it is his right to behave the way he wanted it. He would not ask permission from anybody else. The world likes it or don't like it, because you go for a war, you win the war, and you take the city. That's end of story. But to show respect, as I said, I'm not supporting any of this, but to show respect, they choose to preserve it. And it served as a mosque. In 1934, the circumstances were totally different, and they converted into a mosque. But in fact, these kind of places for worship cannot be just museums in my view. Why should that be a museum? They should be assigned in its original function, which is the place of worship. Now, if you look north from here, you have this Galata Tower. It was built as a watchtower, and as you know, observing fires later, etc. Now we have the technology. You don't need the watchtower anymore. So you can use it as a museum. There's no harm for that. But here, people want to pray. And this is not an obstacle. This is not denouncing Christianity. This is not showing we can do it. No, this is like people want to use it.
And also it has a very emotional, sentimental, and significant value attached to the conquest of Istanbul.
Well, indeed, but people don't see it as now, look, Christian world, we have the... That's not that, you see. It is basic that they are reassigning its function back. That's how I see it. And it's going to be preserved. It's going to be, you know, for generations to come, will be there. So therefore, I think the criticism is quite unfounded in my view.
Absolutely. Professor Webi Bison, as always, we really appreciate your analysis. Thank you very much for being with us on this special transmission.
Thank you.